Good afternoon. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development and Regulatory Services Committee. For the first time for 2014, I've been joined by all members of the committee, council members Cano, Quincy, Fry, Reich, and Warsami. There is a very brief agenda in front of us, including 2 items on consent. Item number 1 is the license applications for approval. The separate license the new license information is called out. Everything else is in the packet. Item number 2 is a resolution allowing the replacement of the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation as the credit enhancer with a private placement from Twin Cities Federal National Bank for High Lake Triangle. Are there any items anyone would like to pull for discussion? Seeing none, I'll move the consent agenda, items 1 and 2. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. We'll then move on to our one discussion item, which is item number 3. Mr. Carroll, welcome.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Kevin Carroll. I'm one of the project coordinators in business development at CPED. My duties include doing some of the upfront work for some of the grant programs the city is involved in. The item on your agenda today involves DEED's redevelopment grant program. And Madam Chair, with your consent, I thought maybe I'd talk a little bit about the city's grant solicitation and review process, because this may come up again in the future with other grant programs, if that's all right.
Mr. Carroll, I'd appreciate if you just talk about the deed process, and when the Met Council and Hennepin County process come out, we'll review those at that time.
Okay. The process for this DEED round, a little bit of background. DEED has typically 2 grant rounds per year for their redevelopment grant program. Their applications are due typically February 1 and August 1. This time around, the applications are due February 3 because that's a Monday. We have a process here whereby several months in advance of that deadline, we advertise the availability of DEED's grant funding in various ways through the city's website, emails, et cetera. We tell people what the city's pre-application deadline is. We have the parties that are interested basically give us their initial drafts of their eventual final applications. They give those to us about 2 months in advance, so we have an opportunity to review them at a staff level. Once that staff review is done, we make recommendations to the council. That's why I'm here today. That's what the staff report is for. We recommend specific projects. The reason we do that is because DEED and all of the other grantors basically want to be certain that the city supports these applications. They don't want to award money to projects that the city doesn't support. So the evidence of the city's support is found in the resolution that's attached to today's staff report. After the resolution is adopted, then we give the project some additional time to finalize their applications. They have to give us their final versions later this month. We'll review them one more time to make sure they're consistent with everything that's happened previously. Then we as the staff members submit those applications to DEED. One of the misconceptions about many grant programs is that the proponent of the project, the developer or property owner, is the applicant. Technically, the city in almost all cases is the applicant. We are applying on behalf of a project. The reason for that is if and when funds are awarded, they're not awarded directly to the project. They're awarded to the city on behalf of the project. We serve the role as basically a conduit. The money comes from the grantor to us. We then pay it out to the developer or project when they prove to us that they've got eligible expenses. So we're probably roughly halfway through the process now. In this particular round, once DEED gets the final applications on February 3, they'll probably take about 60 days to review them. If past history is any indication, they'll make their grant decisions probably in late March. I will then come back to you with another staff report asking your permission to accept the grants. You have to officially approve them. Once you've done that, then the grantors DEED will send us a grant agreement for each project that's been awarded funds. The city will sign that. So they are the grantor, the city is the grantee. Once that's done, then our attorneys draft subrecipient agreements. That's the contractual arrangement between the city and the project. That sets forth the rights and responsibilities of the party, gives us the obligation to convey the funds to them, imposes certain obligations on them. So it's about a 10-step process. I should talk a little bit about what we look at when the pre-applications come in. DEED and all of the other grantors for the other programs have become increasingly insistent that the city send them applications only for projects that are, in their view, ready. They don't want cities and projects bankrolling grant funds for projects that are speculative in nature. For a variety of reasons, they want to make certain that when they award the money, it's going to be used in the reasonably foreseeable future so that it'll generate whatever results are promised in the application. And what DEED looks for with the redevelopment program are the types of things you would expect. They want projects that are going to retain existing jobs, create new jobs, create new housing, especially affordable housing, create new market base, new employment opportunities for existing companies and those that want to relocate to Minnesota or to Minneapolis, et cetera. And frankly, those are some of the factors they look at when they're ranking and scoring the applications. That leads to another important point. I think one of the more common questions I get is, why in staff reports like this do we not recommend ranking or prioritization of projects? It's often anticipated that the grantors would want that. They want to know what Minneapolis considers to be the #1 ranked project, et cetera. We found out over the years that in a way they don't care. If we give them a resolution indicating that you or we support 6 projects, that's really all they want to know. They want to use their own ranking and scoring criteria to award the money in a way that's consistent with what they consider to be their own grant priorities. So I think at least 7 or 8 years ago, we just stopped ranking projects because the grantors weren't using that information. They said it's of no value to us, it's not factored into our system, so we decided it didn't make a lot of sense for us to spend a lot of time on it. So the decision that I'm asking you to make today in the staff report is essentially kind of a toggle switch sort of decision. Do you support these projects? Would you be okay if DEED awarded grant funding for them? Or do you not support these projects for purposes of grant funding? Because if you don't, we'll just take them out of the resolution and we won't have the right to submit those applications on February 3. Another question that I get is, what's the best way to ensure that the greatest number of Minneapolis projects get funding? If there are 3 projects on this list that you really, really like and 3 that you like a little bit less, do you increase the likelihood of funding the projects that you really like by taking the other 3 out? There's no way to predict that for a variety of reasons. Number one, DEED is a little bit inscrutable as to how they rank and score projects, so there's really no way for us to predict what they're going to like or not like. More importantly, this is a statewide program, so any city anywhere in the state can submit a DEED redevelopment application, and we don't really know who we're competing against at this stage. We're the only city in the state that has a pre-application requirement, so there's no way for us to get the other cities to tip their hand and indicate how much they're going to apply for. There's no way for us to assess the strength of those projects. We just have to wait and see what's submitted to DEED. So there's really no way to ensure that any given project gets funding. You could take 5 of the 6 projects out of the mix here and submit only one. There's no guarantee that that project is going to get funded because it's the only Minneapolis project. There's a chance that another project that would have gotten funded that you took out of the mix, that money is going to go to some other project from some other city. So we've been fairly successful, I think, in garnering a lot of grant money for a lot of Minneapolis projects, and I think, frankly, the main way we've done that is by submitting lots of applications. That increases the likelihood that a large share of the money that they award is going to go to at least some Minneapolis project or projects.
Is that the end of your report?
I'm getting very, very close.
Okay.
I'm also sometimes asked how much money is available and how much could Minneapolis potentially get. This is a grant program where DEED doesn't say we're going to award $2.5 million or $3 million. They don't like to specify in advance exactly how much they're going to award. There's a pool, a pot of money that they have. They don't like to tie their hands in advance. If they've got a weak round, they may award only $1 million. If they've got a round with lots of high-quality applications, they may award $3 million or more. Our best guess at this point is that they are likely to award something probably in the $2 to $3 million range. Of that, Minneapolis could theoretically get no more than half of that. There is a statutory restriction that essentially says that if they get sufficient applications from non-metro cities or from greater Minnesota cities, they have to award at least half of the money to those cities. So we're competing essentially with all other metro area cities for about 50% of $2 to $3 million. So we have maybe $1 million to $1.5 million maximum we could expect to get out of this round. And the phrase that we use when we have lots of applications and lots of requests is oversubscribed. Virtually every grant round we're involved in is oversubscribed, mostly because of the applications Minneapolis submits. So I don't have any illusions about all of these projects being funded, but they're all strong projects. Many of them are projects that existing council members have seen multiple times. We've submitted for prior grant applications. I think we would be very fortunate to get maybe 1 or 2 of these projects funded. But our recommendation to you is that you authorize us to submit all 6 of them. They will compete against one another and against other applications from other cities. and we'll happily take whatever deed chooses to award.
Are there questions for Mr. Carroll? Councilmember Frye.
So if deed doesn't care if we take one particular item off, why do we go through the practice of submitting them all?
Well, because from a staff standpoint, we consider these all strong projects. These are all projects, as I said, the city has supported at one time or another. I didn't mention previously, but an important part of the staff report, I think, is the section that talks about previous directives. That's where you can see where these have come before the council before, what the council has done.
But so if we decline to pass one of the items through, though, then it seems like that doesn't have any impact ultimately on whether deed grants the funding?
Well, they can't grant funding to a project that's not on the list. So the developer couldn't go around us and submit directly to deed unless they had another sponsor, like Hennepin County or something like that?
Well, they have to come from a governmental entity. I've never seen an instance where the county, for example, would sponsor an application from the city when the city did not. I think their philosophy it would be, if the city didn't support it, why should we? So if I understand your question, they all have to come from the city, and taking it out of the resolution takes it out of the round completely and deprives it of any opportunity to get funding.
Okay, I understand.
Councilmember Quincy, followed by Councilmember Kano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Carroll, I just had a quick question about, does the staff play a role in assisting folks in the creation of their application?
Yes, we do in several ways. In the early stages, when people call us about this grant program, we get preliminary information about their project. We try to figure out if it's got eligible costs and how competitive it's going to be. Then they often call us and ask to meet with us before they submit the pre-application, and we give them advice on how to structure it and word it in a way to tell a compelling story. Once the pre-applications come in, we also review those. We pay particular attention to some of the metrics that DEED looks at. We look at things like whether their projection of future market value is accurate, whether their projections regarding retained and new jobs is realistic. If we see something that we think would be problematic for the grantor, then we suggest maybe alternate ways of wording it. So we work with them on that process right up until it's submitted. In some cases, we're making revisions a day or two before the applications are submitted. So we will give them as much help as they will allow us to provide.
Thank you. That was really helpful because I want to make sure everybody understands the role that the staff has and garnering new business for the city of Minneapolis. Thank you for that work. The other question I had was, should someone not be granted full funding, they get a partial grant, do they have an opportunity to apply again, or is that the extent of their application process?
Technically, they don't get only one bite of the apple. If they're unsuccessful in getting grant funding, if the timing of the project will allow them to do so, they have the right to apply again. So, for example, if the funding they want to get is provided only by this particular program and they don't get it in this round, they would know that by, as I said, late March. They could then apply in the August 1 round. Our pre-application deadline for that would be in early June. In many cases, frankly, that's not possible because, frankly, DEED likes to see these projects get lined up for funding just before they're about to start. So if they miss that window of opportunity, very rarely can a project be delayed enough to get into make the timing work for the next grant round. But if it does, they can take another run at it, and we'll help them do that.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Kano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one of the things I wanted to highlight and talk about today was the Seward Friendship Store. And so I want to talk about why I'm supporting this particular project as one of the potential grantees. And so, as you know, Seward Co-op is proposing to open up a second store in what is technically, I think, Ward 8. And that would be in the Bryant neighborhood. And Ward 9 involves Central. And so this particular store would impact the folks that live in the area. And there's been a lot of conversations about, is this store going to cause gentrification and kick people of color out of our neighborhoods and low-income community members? And then there's been a lot of people who want to sort of tackle food deserts and want to make sure that organic and local food is available to their families. my approach is to really try to bring those two voices together. I think that, we're smart enough to have sent somebody to the moon, or at least we think we have. And so we can certainly figure this out. So I was happy to hear from city staff today that the Seward Co-op is engaged with the city on racial equity hiring goals and conversations with CPED, and that we need to connect it to the Civil Rights Department. So just as background to that specific proposal, I'm really happy to hear that the Seward Co-op is taking that initiative and that our city staff are working with them to do that. And that's why I'm really excited to support this and hope that we can bring people up from those neighborhoods by connecting them to the jobs that this potential store could open up to.
Other questions for Mr. Carroll before I ask mine? So, Mr. Carroll, you mentioned a couple of times readiness, yet it seems to me this project called Brick House Lofts hasn't even gone to the neighborhood yet. How could they meet the criteria of readiness if the report itself says that they have set up meetings with the Neighborhood and Business Association?
There are some projects that are on very accelerated timelines. Their hope is to be able to start construction virtually the moment they get a deed grant award, if they get one. They hope to have this housing available for occupancy by the fall term for the upcoming school year. I don't know whether that's practical or not. They say that it's practical. The main reason they haven't gone to the neighborhood was because they were working on some design issues, and they wanted to wait until they had things finalized a little bit more before they sought input. I think some of that has occurred since the report was written, because this was done, some time ago. And there may be Brick House Loft representatives here today. I don't see them, actually. I encourage them to be here.
That kind of sums it up for me. They're not here. They haven't gone to the neighborhood. They need a change in zoning to allow the density they want, so they're clearly not ready to go. If we were looking at this from a housing finance point of view, we wouldn't even consider it. And it's a significant amount of money, $800,000. I know you think that, well, throw in as much as you want. My concern is it does beat out one of the projects that we've been working hard on, like Broadway Flats in an impacted area of town. So I guess I'm going to pull that off, and if by committee of the whole, you can report back that they have met with the neighborhood and they have some sort of indication of approval. I mean, if they were worried about us, if they needed us and it's $800,000 and they're not even here today, and they haven't been to the neighborhood yet, I'm not sure why we would move this forward up and over everyone else who has been in the pool.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll be able to provide you with more information about that, because I know they were actively involved in getting meetings set up and having contacts, et cetera. I can't explain why they're not here today. We always encourage them to do that, to be able to answer questions like this.
Yeah, I would think if it was $800,000, I'd show up.
Yeah. And also the concept of readiness is, there's a spectrum of readiness for all the projects here. And, they're ready in some ways and perhaps less ready in others, but I understand your concern, and I'll talk with them about that. And see
Are they asking for any other financial assistance
Not from the city, as far as I know.
or state or anything else?
I don't think the timing is going to work for them to seek brownfield remediation funding if they need that. They haven't specifically told me that they do. So as far as I know, this is the only type of funding that they're seeking.
So there's a preservation of a historic building. Are they asking for state historic preservation tax credits?
I don't think they've submitted an application for that, and I don't know that they've made a decision about whether to pursue that or not.
Okay. Other questions for staff? Councilmember Gordon. Welcome. We miss you.
Thank you. I just couldn't resist. It's such a great committee, and you do so much important work here. I'm sorry I'm not going to be with you at every meeting, but I did want to come in when I heard you discussing this issue, because the Brick House development is in the second ward. I have had an opportunity to meet with the team, and I do know that they have met with the zoning and planning committee of the neighborhood organization. I was waiting to hear back from the committee chair of that group, so they've already set up meetings with the neighborhood, and indications are people are pretty supportive, because they are going to be preserving this one building that people think is worth preserving, and it's a gem, and they're also going to be reusing another one. So the project is moving along. I can't speak to all the other questions, but I do know they've at least met with the pertinent neighborhood committee.
Okay, so perhaps we can just find out by committee of the whole how far they've gone into that process. It's kind of a red flag to see no previous directives, no contact with the neighborhood association, no contact with the business association, but we want to be occupied by the beginning of the fall semester. I don't know. It sounds like they just want to get in on this grant round more than anything else. So I just want to hear more about what they've done in the community.
And just to be clear, they did have contact, they just weren't able to get on a meeting agenda. They've talked with them.
Probably like one person who's a staff person they've talked to. I mean,
could be.
Meaningful conversation with the neighborhoods is meaningful conversation. Talking to one person about getting on the agenda is not. Further comments or questions from Mr. Carroll? Did you want to go through the projects, or I am fairly confident everyone on the committee has read the report.
Then I would pass on going through the projects, but, we're always available to answer questions. And frankly, some of the people in the audience are city-assigned project coordinators that are working on these projects on a day-to-day basis. I'm kind of the generalist and they're the specialist, so there's plenty of people to answer questions that you might have either now or later about the
Okay.
projects.
Are there questions on individual projects for Mr. Carroll or any of the CPED staff? Seeing none, on the motion by Councilmember Frye.
So move to approve the staff recommendation, item number 3.
Councilmember Frye has moved approval of the staff recommendation. Further comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item is approved. Seeing no further business before us, we are adjourned.
Thank you.